a frog marriage, and we're getting in an old ASAP.
I can teach him the way my mom taught me. Swim!
We'll just need to fight back. I'm taking such good care of my little white boys. I beg your pardon?
Greetings and salutations, guys. I am going to rank my top 10 of 2024 here. A few days later than I wanted to. There was a few movies I was trying to see from, the end of the year. I was trying to catch up on a few movies just to know if they should be on this list. I saw a few of those movies, and one actually did sneak into this top 10. There's still a few more I want to get to. There's a lot of movies out there, so who knows if there'll be a revised version of this. I probably won't make a video for that, but I will say I'll put a link in the description to my Letterboxd list where I've ranked all the movies from 2024 releases that I saw. So you can see the full ranking there. I don't like doing a worst list, but you can go to the bottom of that list and you can figure it out. But right now, a few days into January 2025, here is where I am with my top 10, which, really is my 10 favorite movies of the year. I like a lot of genre stuff. I like a lot of horror stuff. So I'm, this list is probably going to skew a little more that way than other people will, because guess what? It's all subjective. I know people don't want any subjectivity in their reviews, which is not possible. But here is where I'm at with my 10 favorite movies of 2024. Number 10 is The Substance. This is Coralie Farge's a sophomore film, her follow-up to Revenge, which was a really cool first feature. I love that this movie actually found some mainstream success, only because what an insane completely out there body horror film this is that you would not expect to get any traction in the mainstream. So the fact that it did, I think, is great. Demi Moore here giving this fantastic performance. It really was important this movie got someone like Demi Moore, I think, at the center of it. It means so much to have someone that we can identify as, a big star that we have a history with to play this role of someone dealing with aging and how society looks at aging, especially for women. And the lengths that she feels she has to go to retain her youth and beauty. Fantastic performance. And then Margaret Qualley, who is always great and had a great year in several films, is excellent as well, has Sue, her sort of dark doppelganger. Just a really amazing experience, this film. It's so twisted and weird. And Demi Moore, has all these scenes by herself where she really just goes for broke. And some of that involves incredible prosthetics, but some of it just involves her looking in a mirror, trying to get ready for a date, and having a pretty big meltdown in the process. It's absolutely riveting. The third act maybe could have been a little tighter. I don't know if they needed to go back to that New Year's event twice. Maybe once would have worked out. But overall, this movie's really aged well for me the more I think about it. It really has stuck with me, like The Substance should. Number 9 is Heretic. This is written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods. These guys have written a lot of films. They have directed a couple other films, but I think this is the best thing that they've done so far, easily. And they've done other good work, but I really loved the sort of cat and mouse game at the center of this film, the showdown, the face-off between these characters as these two Mormon girls are trapped by this older man who wants to kind of teach them a lesson about religion from his skewed perspective. I'm not the only one to say it kind of felt like a twist on the Saw formula, but in a great way. It has its own vibe to it, its own feel. Hugh Grant, who's had a really interesting few years playing more villains, mostly comedically, gets to really twist that here because he's playing a genuinely scary and troubled individual here, and he's great using his innate charm and charisma in such a different way, and how he exudes this feeling of superiority that, is maybe not as earned as he thinks it is, but he thinks he completely is in control here. And then the two other main characters here are so well played by Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East. This has been such a great year for horror movies, but also for actresses in horror movies. There are so many wonderful performances throughout the year, but I think Thatcher and East are real standouts. And, East especially, I just thought she was so good in The Fabelmans, but this is a real attention-getting performance because she has to make this pivot from such a naive and, endearing and funny character to going through absolute hell and the transformation that will cause in her. I really love seeing that transformation, and yeah, I've returned this movie a couple times and it still really grabs me each time. Number 8 is Love Lies Bleeding, another sophomore effort. Great year for sophomore films. This one is from Rose Glass, and I thought this was a huge evolution for her because I liked parts of Saint Maud, but I wasn't as in love with that film as some were. But God, Love Lies Bleeding, just absolutely terrific. It is, another really sort of audacious, somewhat bizarre film. It goes into some surreal places as it proceeds. But its central relationship between Kristen Stewart and Katie O'Brien has these women falling in love in this very small Dust Bowl town with a very dangerous environment around them, and how that escalates. Ed Harris is so good in this sort of scary antagonistic role. And Kristen Stewart, she's been great in a million things. She's great here, but she has such an amazing scene partner with Katie O'Brien, who after a few years of, having a lot of interesting little genre roles and popping up on The Mandalorian and being in Quantumania, makes an absolute star-making performance here. She is so great. A lot is asked of her in this role. Obviously, she brings the physicality, but that wouldn't, be enough. She has to be this big buff woman to play this bodybuilder, but then you have to see the nuance of this character, the vulnerability of this character. I loved everything about her performance in this movie, and it makes me really excited to see her in future projects. Number 7 is Challengers. I can't even say it's the latest film from Luca Guadagnino because he's kind of putting out so many films so quickly. He's already put their movie out since then. But yeah, this one left a huge impression that has stuck with me the entire year. I think I said in my review of it back then, it's just such an experience, this movie. It is, so propulsive. That amazing score that you have driving it. It's so operatic. And I know some people thought maybe it was too much, the movie itself, but also even that score. But I thought it all fit perfectly for the way it was just pushing forward with the story of these characters who, were so driven, and, their very complex relationship and everything about the way they bounce off each other and the physicality of that, whether that be a sexual physicality or a sports physicality, because they're all tennis players, or maybe the intermixing of the two. I just really loved how it just completely took a hold of me, and I think other people who are really into this film, and thrust you into this story of these characters and how they just couldn't help but sort of escalate the situation, obviously in a bigger way than maybe they needed to, and it was certainly self-destructive in a lot of places. Love the 3 central performances. Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Feist are all excellent here, I think, playing these characters at 2 very different ages as we go back and forth, and I really love sort of seeing the evolution of the 3 of them throughout the film. Number 6 is A Quiet Place Day One, written and directed by Michael Sarnowski. Look, there was no way I would have expected that this movie would be on the list when I started the year, just because I've enjoyed the other Quiet Place movies, but it wasn't like I was like, hell yeah, there's a new one, it's a prequel. I just thought, okay, cool, I'll go check it out. I think the X factor here is Michael Sarnowski, who his last movie, Pig, was so wonderful, the Nicolas Cage film, and yeah, he brings so much sort of heart to this movie. I think it works very well as a Quiet Place movie and as a horror movie, and there are some really great suspenseful sequences in this film. But really the thing that I loved about this movie, and the reason it's on this list, is the characters and the central relationship between Lupita Nyong'o's character and Joseph Quinn, playing these 2 people that are in the initial aftermath of this attack by these aliens in New York City, find each other. They have no prior relationship, but the bond that they form in this, incredibly chaotic situation. And I really was invested in their relationship. I thought these 2 actors really brought so much nuance and depth to these roles. Lupita Nyong'o doesn't do that many movies, and I think that when she does, it really stands out how many are really good films and how great she always is in them. And I never expected this movie to really hit me emotionally the way it did, but it really got me by the end of it. I felt like, this was really a wonderful small-scale story on something, which is funny to say about a movie that's like in the middle of Manhattan, an insane alien attack. But by being so focused on these 2 people and what it's like for her as someone with a terminal cancer diagnosis in the middle of this situation, and how she chooses to live out, what she already knew were her final days. Very, very touching film. Number 5 is Hundreds of Beavers, directed by Mike Cheslick. This is the one, guys. This is the one that snuck in. I had not seen this movie till just a couple days ago, and I knew almost nothing about it except for the title and people saying, hey, have you seen Hundreds of Beavers? It's really good. And wondering what the hell is that movie. Man, this was an amazing movie. Look, it is weird as hell. It is this black and white throwback to the silent film era with almost no dialogue. And it is a super slapstick film, but it's also infused with animation influence. You know, very sort of Looney Tunes rules are at work here. It has some video game stuff going on where there's some obvious pulls from how video games work with the maps and characters and how they go around and have to complete tasks. It has a bunch of people in goofy animal costumes to play the Hundreds of Beavers, but some of the other animals that this character at the core encounters along the way. It is just also, though, funny as hell. I thought this movie was just hysterical. I didn't know if it could sustain itself for its entire running time, even though I was enjoying the beginning. It completely did. It escalates. It goes to so many wacky, funny places. By virtue of being a mostly silent film, you kind of have to stare at the screen, and I love that because it's a very smart movie about a lot of silliness, you know? And as low budgeted as it is, you can also feel, oh my god, the hard work that had to have gone into creating this thing. And I love the central performance by Ryland Brixton Cole Tews, who also co-wrote the film, because he's kind of going for broke in this very wild role. Yeah, this was just an absolute freaking delight. I really hope I get to see it with an audience at some point. You know, I watched it at home, but I know it's had some great screenings in the last couple years, because I think this would just absolutely kill with a bunch of people. Yeah, Hundreds of Beavers is, you know, again, it's got that Regency bias, but I think it is a new favorite. It's one that I really am excited to revisit. Number 4 is Strange Darling, written and directed by J.T. Molnar. Another sophomore effort. You know, they have that term sophomore slump, and I feel like this was the year where a lot of directors said, I am going to defy that sophomore slump, and my God, did they. I have to say, I actually haven't seen Molnar's first film in this case, so can't compare it. But Strange Darling, you know, was another really pleasant surprise that, you know, I knew people were buzzing about it a little bit, but I went into it pretty cold, not knowing a lot. And it absolutely was fascinating to me. The way it works, the intricacy of it, you know, telling the story out of order, which is obviously not a brand new idea, but the way that here we're getting these different pieces of what exactly is going on with these two central characters, played by Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner. I love, you know, the way it is depicted. I think it's an excellent looking movie. Giovanni Ribisi was a cinematographer. It has a lot of atmosphere to it. And I think it really works, you know, when you rewatch it. I know that some people might have worried that, oh, well, once you know what actually is the real story here, is there anything left on a rewatch? I've seen it a couple times since, and I think it completely still holds up. And a lot of that has to do with the central performances. Kyle Gallner has been so great in so many different films over the years. He's wonderful here playing, you know, this character that is, you know, at the beginning, we're just like watching him as this madman. Very scary, different side of him that we haven't seen in other roles, and he's excellent playing that. And then Willa Fitzgerald, another just standout sort of breakout role. She'd been in other things before, the Scream TV series. I'd seen her in Fall of the House of Usher, but amazing central performance that if you read the backstory in this film and how much lack of faith there was by a lot of the executives involved, and how they were really fighting with the filmmakers, and how they didn't think she was doing a good job, wanted to replace her. It's insanity, because you watch this movie and go, well, first of all, this movie is great. Second of all, how could they have doubted her? She's amazing. She's so excellent. It is definitely one of those roles where I feel like she is going to get a lot of work from it, and a lot of well-deserved work from it. Number 3 is The Wild Robot, written and directed by Chris Sanders. Sanders has this phenomenal history in animation, going back to his Disney days, and he's the co-director of Lilo and Stitch and of How to Train Your Dragon when he moves over to DreamWorks. But this is his best work yet. It is just such a lovely movie. I had not read the books on which it was based, but I found it so touching and so heartfelt. And it is funny that it again stars Lupita Nyong'o, who again doesn't do a lot of films, but she had 2 this year, and they were 2 of my favorites. And she's wonderful as this character, this playing this robot who is going to discover her humanity along the way. And I know we've seen that, sort of basic story before, obviously, but the way that Sanderson tells that story is incredibly effective. And it's a lovely story about motherhood and about adoptive motherhood and parenthood. And it is very beautiful to look at. I love the animation style of it, the score. It all, really just sort of grabs a hold of you and has the sort of storybook feeling that you would hope it has. It's strange structurally. I think it has this sort of interesting thing where it kind of goes to this really dramatic peak earlier than you might expect. But then I think it is able to sustain past that because as the film continues and there's more to the story to tell and other very important, impactful things happen along the way. Yeah, I really loved the journey with these characters. And I just, loved the central character and watching her transformation along the way. Just a really beautiful movie on a lot of levels. Number 2 is Aora, written and directed by Sean Baker. I've loved Baker's work for many years, and The Florida Project was one of my favorite movies the year that came out. But this is his best movie yet. And the work he does here, and the work he does alongside Mikey Madison, who, she's been great for a few years now in several projects, but she is so terrific here and so holds the screen and so kind of plays this very big character with her, big accent and makes her feel, super real. And she's a character who is very guarded by nature, but I love that. And I love that she doesn't have to have sort of big monologues about her past to still kind of give you peeks about who she really is. Obviously, the final scene is this amazing culmination that also kind of gives you a peek behind the curtain of Annie/Aora that we haven't gotten the whole movie, but I think that Madison the whole movie is layering that in, what's going on underneath with her and the walls she's put up around her. It is also a very funny movie. The entire second half and the shift it takes into this sort of edgier, almost like crime caper in a weird way, could have derailed the movie. Instead, I think it just makes it even better. And the character dynamics as she is, bouncing off of these other guys that she's driving around town with are so funny and also oddly endearing, and also bring in this entirely new relationship into the film. Once again, I think it really shows you the empathy that Sean Baker has for the characters that he centers his movies on, who are not usually the kinds of characters who get stories told about them, where they're the actual, important central part of the story. And the fact that this movie is on a bigger scale than his other films, because Annie is brought into this sort of much bigger, richer world than anything she's experienced before, I think is a really interesting sort of class story in and of itself here, as we see how she bounces off of this guy that she, has this whirlwind romance with, and then what happens when his family shows up. It is got a lot of interesting layers to it, and then, it's also got Mikey Madison in just one of the best performances of the year, easily. And number 1, we've got The First Omen, directed by Arkasha Stevenson, who also co-wrote the film. Yes, this was my number 1 at the halfway point when I did a rundown a few months ago, if you saw that. And yes, I know it is a very strange choice, and one I am shocked to be saying is my number 1 movie of the year. Another horror prequel. I think it's very funny that my list has 2 of those, especially when prequels get, kind of very maligned often, and I get a lot of people saying like, oh, do we ever need prequels? And one here where I understand there was a lot of reasons to be skeptical, because this is the 6th movie in the Omen franchise, but which is not a franchise that was a very hot on the mind of everyone franchise when this film came out. And unfortunately, this movie's box office, I think, kind of reflected that. But also, it's like, I hate the term, like, who asked for this with a lot of movies. I think that gets said all the time about, you could say that about almost any movie ever. You might not have asked for it, but it could still be your new favorite movie. But yes, there was a reason to think, really? A prequel to the original Omen from the 1970s? This seems very random and just a way to, use a piece of IP just for its own sake because there's some familiarity to the title. But I think Arkasha Stevenson shows that you can do something great with anything. And she took this Omen prequel and my God, did she run with it. It is a beautiful movie visually. It is a harrowing movie as we watch, what happens to this character as she goes along and has these terrible things happen to her. And it is once more an amazing performance at the center of this movie. I mentioned how many great performances were from actresses in horror films this year, and there's so many great ones, but Nell Tiger-Free is just one of my favorite performances of the year. She is so excellent in this movie. She has to, again, show a transformation that I think she does a kind of epic job of what this poor girl goes through and what she has to learn along the way, and what physically it asked of her as an actress along the way. It is such a good film. I've seen it 6 times now, and it completely works for me. I wasn't some huge Omen fan going in. I liked the original movie. It's a good movie. But yeah, I thought that this just, in a year where there's so many great horror movies, this is the one that, I don't know, just sunk its teeth into me, sunk its claws into me. And yeah, I couldn't shake it in all the right ways. I kept thinking about this one, and kept, clearly, because I've watched it so many times, kept wanting to experience it again. This was a year with a lot of movies about strange, unsettling pregnancies and birth scenes. And there was a lot going on that we could talk a lot about there in many other movies. A lot of other good movies had stuff going on with that, but I think this is the best one. The way it tells this story, and it works as a really good prequel, by the way. It's its own feel. It doesn't feel like it's trying to just mimic what Richard Donner did with The Omen, but I think it's a great way it hands off to The Omen at the end of it. I just really, really felt like they nailed this in a way that is, it really shows you can be cynical about anything, but anything can also be great in the hands of the right people. It makes you really excited to see what Akarsha Stevenson does next. It makes you really excited to see what Nell Tiger-Free does next. So that is my favorite movie of the year, The First Omen. Those are my top 10 films of the year. Like I said, you can go to the description below. I'll put a link to all my rankings for all the 2024 movies I've seen. There'll be a few added in the next few weeks as I finally catch up on last few that are out there as we go further into award season. All right, guys, thanks. If you can like and subscribe, that would be great. And I'll be back with more as we go into the 2025 movies. Take care.